What's up, you guys? Here we are, another episode of the SnapRefund Podcast. Super excited. We've got a great guest today, Kyle Weaver. Now, every claim is a moment of truth. In transportation, that moment moves fast. Trucking claims escalate quickly and carry severity that can define a company's balance sheet. The window between an accident and a well-defended file is measured in hours, not weeks, as many of you know. So, what makes his perspective different is where Kyle came from. Kyle spent nearly a decade in the trenches of trucking. He tried transportation cases as a shareholder at a regional law firm, and he still serves as assistant general counsel for a fourth-generation trucking company in Fort Worth, managing litigation, insurance, and risk. That's 3 seats, and most people only sit in one of them, if any. He's defended the claim, he's carried the risk, and now he runs the operation that handles it. Today, we're talking about what separates a well-handled claim from an expensive one. Kyle, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Nice to be here, guys.
Absolutely. So tell us, what was the genesis for Akana Claims Management?
Yeah, great question. Akana was not born in the boardroom. It was born out of frustration. So as defense counsel, I saw claims after they were usually headed in the wrong direction. When I came into the trucking company, I saw how difficult it was to find external partners who operated with a sense of urgency and ownership over our claims. So we kept asking ourselves the same question, which was, why are we accepting a system or a team where investigations started days later, communication was often fragmented, and everyone owned a small piece of the claim but didn't really own the entire outcome? So we elected to build our own process. In the beginning, we weren't really trying to create another TPA. We were trying to solve a problem that we were experiencing every single day as a trucking company. And once we began to see the results internally, we realized that other carriers like us could benefit from this same program. And so that's how Akana began.
Yeah, that's a really great genesis. And, so you've defended transportation claims in the courtroom, you've carried the risk inside a trucking company, and now run a claims operation. What did each of those seats teach you that the other two could not?
Yeah, each seat teaches you a little something different. As a defense attorney, you learn the rules of evidence and procedure. You learn how certain facts come in and out of the case and how juries react to certain things. You see what evidence matters and what things can and can't be fixed in front of a jury. Inside the trucking company, you realize that every claim is a business decision. It's could jeopardize the company's balance sheet, its customers, and on and on. So insurance costs, reputation, things like that. In the claims organization, it teaches you how to execute at a very high level and how urgency matters. So you can have all the great strategies in the world, but where the rubber meets the road, that's where it matters. And if you're not consistently delivering on those, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're playing for keeps, so there really is no do-over, which really adds a level of pressure to these situations that I think it takes a measured hand and a steady soul to weather. So when I look at what Akana is doing, and I love what you guys do so much, it's really innovative. Your rapid response approach was built in-house at a trucking company before it was ever brought to market. What did you see, if anything, that was broken about traditional claims handling that pushed you to build your own?
Yeah, great question. Traditional claims handling was, I would say, reactive rather than proactive. So in a traditional claims model, you would struggle to get the other party's contact information. You would struggle to get in touch with them, to listen to them, to solve their immediate needs. Whereas in our claims handling approach, the claimant comes first, solving their immediate needs comes first, and every minute after an accident is a wasted minute. We want to be in touch with the other person that was involved in the accident as quickly as humanly possible, to engage with them on an empathetic level, to hear what's happening to them. Whether the accident is our fault or not, we want to reach out and build that human connection with them to ensure that their immediate needs are met.
Yeah, I mean, it really is important with that first few minutes, what happens there. So really breaking things down, what happens in the first 24 hours after an accident that decides how the entire claim plays out?
Yeah, great question. In the first 24 hours, perceptions of you, perception of the trucking company are formed, relationships are built or lost. That initial tone, you and I know colloquially that there's this expression, first impressions are formed in seconds and are very difficult to get rid of, right? And so that's always true. It's especially true in claims and claims handling. So the first several minutes to hours after an accident is that opportunity for us to build trust, to build that relationship, and then eventually to grow that relationship over time, to meet their needs, to meet our needs, to really make what could be a negative experience for somebody involved in an accident and a claim to make it a positive one.
Yeah, you're really preaching to the choir. This is so paramount in importance that we found early on as we built SnapRefund and launched the ClaimSnap platform, the AgentSnap platform. We really resonated with that because it's what we were hearing from both sides of the coin, truly. So walk us through a claim, if you have any examples, where rapid response changed the outcome, or maybe one where, an example where you imagine it could, and what happened in that scenario, and what would it look like without the rapid response?
Yeah, so there's really three, I think, scenarios where rapid response comes into play. So in minor claims where the claimant feels ignored, those are claims that without a rapid triage, it suddenly becomes a much larger claim because of hurt feelings, because of feeling ignored. The process largely gets out of control in that one, and so the dollars rack up pretty quickly. The second type of accident is perhaps one where you're not at fault, but the roadway evidence is out there and it's either destroyed or lost. Some of the video surveillance, perhaps from surrounding businesses, is lost. Witness statements become stale. Witness memories become stale. You're not able to record those appropriately and preserve them for evidence. And so what would have been otherwise a winnable case becomes a loser because when you show up in front of a jury, you can't just say, well, why is your version right? And you go, well, because I say so, right? You've got to have that evidence that's out there to prove your case. And then the third of those is a severe or very significant accident where building a relationship with the party to make it, to just connect on a human level and just be there and be empathetic. I can't necessarily change what happened. I can't change the bad thing that happened to you, but I can support you and be with you along the way. And so I think those are really the three instances where rapid response comes into play.
That's powerful, Kyle. I think one thing that I can definitely say for sure, just knowing you in this time that we have, is you are a person that cares and your team cares. And I think when you bring that genuine approach to what you do, it really does matter to the person that's on the other end of that. And that's really key because it's true to who you are and true to your organization. But I'm starting to see that severity in trucking keeps climbing and it's rising. How much of that is actually preventable?
Yeah, great question. Trucking losses are a function of risk. There is no such thing as a completely avoidable. All risk is not completely avoidable. So as a function of miles driven, as a function of other cars on the roadway, and how your freeways are congested or not. So there's never a day where we can completely eliminate all risk in trucking, and that's true of life in general. If you guys didn't take some risk, you would never leave your house. But severity, not every accident starts out as a severe loss, right? Sometimes they can develop into severity, and that kind of comes back to what we've been talking about all along, which is this early intervention process. As claims go on, you've heard this term before, loss development. Generally speaking, loss development in our industry is not positive. For the most part, on average, claims deteriorate over time. So medical bills increase, lost wages increase, the special damages or economic damages generally always increase in time. And so some of that severity is preventable by getting involved early.
That makes sense. I've heard different startup pitches over the years start to lean into the idea of avoidance of nuclear verdicts because time can be your friend in many things in life, and in general is not your friend when it comes to risk exposure. So I think that really rings true for not only the reality, but the direction of awareness that we're seeing in the market amongst those who actually hold the balance sheet and have to make sure their loss ratios are preserved. So when we look at Akana, right, and your positioning overall in the market, I see Akana positions itself as a boutique group that operates as an extension of your client's team rather than a corporate giant. And I think we've learned there are a lot of advantages to that approach. But talk to the audience, what can you do, what do you do at that size that a large TPA structurally is unable to do?
Yeah, we're more nimble. You have access to us, your executive team. So when a customer calls, they call me directly. There's not a switchboard where they're talking to the receptionist to talk to the executive assistant to talk to somebody else. You just call me right on the cell phone, 24/7. You can text me. It's all like dealing with you guys, right? When I email you, you answer. When I call you, you answer, and I'm dealing straight with you. Rather than in some of these large conglomerates, it's like press 1 for this person, and then go through the just pinwheel of death, right? And so we are fanatic about claims handling, right? We're fanatic about claims. We hold ourselves to a very, very high standard for responsiveness, for creative thinking, for outside the box thinking. Just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it needs to be done in this case or in the future, right? The claims objective is to get the best possible outcome for everybody involved, for the customer. And so whatever we have to do to get that result, we are happy to do that within the bounds of legality, morality, ethics, and things like that. So being a boutique just means that all that red tape, all that traditional structure that you see within traditional insurance companies or other TPAs, you're just kind of straight to the point.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your kind words, and it's been a real pleasure working with you as well. Because of that approach, because of being a boutique shop with really that white glove service that you guys provide for your clients as well. Motor carriers are increasingly self-insured or carrying large deductibles. How does that change what they should demand from a claims partner?
Yeah, absolutely. The number, whatever your self-insured retention or your self-insurance amount is, whatever the number happens to be, whether it's 250,000, $1 million or more, that money does not come easily. Having sat in the seat at a trucking company, I can tell you that just because that number that you ultimately pay out is $1 million or 250,000 or whatever it is, the revenue needed to generate that $1 million is far, far, far more. And so you're talking about a significant number of miles that we have to run, a significant number of loads that we have to pull to be able to write that check when something bad happens. That is one of the things that the industry on the other side of what I do needs to understand, what the general public needs to understand when they sit in juries like this. As a business, we have many stakeholders. We have the public at large as a stakeholder. We have our customers who provide them services. We have employees. And so this is not monopoly money. There are real lives that this money impacts. And so let me get off my soapbox, but as a business owner who carries this risk, what you've got to demand is somebody who thinks about your business and your risk in the same way. So what is your philosophy of claims, and is my TPA going to handle that in the same way that I would? Are we aligned in purpose and principle? And if not, then you need to find somebody else. If you're fanatic about claims and the claims manager you have is not, well, that's probably not a good fit. If you want more control over your claims, is this TPA going to give that to me? Or transparency, or whatever the core concept to you is. If your TPA, your claims manager, doesn't do that for you, then you got to look elsewhere.
That makes a lot of sense. In so many aspects of business and life, really, alignment is so crucial. And I think most business relationships that go south usually start with some misalignment of expectations. So I think that's very on point. That's a good segue.
It's an unwillingness, Cody, to not have the conversation because it's uncomfortable. But by not having the uncomfortable conversation early, you get into this relationship where it's like, man, I wish I would have just said that up front, right? And now 100%. You're miserable on the back end.
Totally. And it gets harder to have that conversation the longer it goes on unhad.
It does.
And then the avoidant part of you that saves some pain in the beginning is you're really getting so much more pain, months or years down the road. It's a good segue. As we talk about writing those checks, sending those payments, that's the last mile of every claim. And that's really, in a lot of ways, the product from a consumer-facing standpoint. What's actually being insured is that there is this potential for a payment. where does the money actually get stuck in your experience?
Yeah, money usually gets stuck. It depends on the size of the payment, but in a lot of organizations, it can get stuck in the approvals process. If you're writing a fairly large check, do we have, the payment controls? And look, payment controls are important. We want to make sure that, the money is being handled in a responsible fashion, especially when you're managing other people's money and claims. But that also cannot come at the expense of an opportunity to resolve a claim and make someone's life material better, to close the claim. But then it gets stuck for 2 weeks waiting on this form to be completed, that form to be completed, 7 levels of manager to approve it. That's a little ridiculous. So a lot of bureaucracy can clog it up, and then really just the logistics of it. So imagine it's 3 o'clock where I'm sitting now. What if we settle the claim right now? Can I get my CFO to cut a check, sign the check, put it in an overnight mail envelope? When's it going to get there? Is it going to get lost? Is there weather in Philadelphia where I'm sending it? All these different things that just delay it. And when you have those delays, it ends up costing you, both in terms of your credibility and in terms of maybe somebody says, you know what, this just isn't for me anymore. I don't think I want to go through with this settlement or whatever it is. And so you had a deal and now you don't. And so that is the very real cost and the very real experience of processing checks and claims.
100%. I know Anissa's going to jump with a question, but I just have to say on that last note, there's a show called Suits. I think Meghan Markle was on it for a time, and I used to watch it back in the day. And there's a line that always stuck out to me. The main character, he goes up to this college kid who made this deal with this professor to pay him to let him pass the class or something, and then he basically tells him hey, that's not going to happen anymore because the professor became their client. And then a spoiler warning, by the way, it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
But the kid goes, well, what, we had a deal, and then the main character says, well, here's a life lesson. In the real world, deals change. So any minute that thing is not actually getting closed and executed, it really does matter, because until it's inked, until it's done, it can change. It can always change.
That's right.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But I think it also makes me appreciate what you're building at Akana even more, because of that philosophy of putting the claimant first, is putting yourself in their seat and understanding the importance of what it means to them in such a moment. That really is valuable. And I think that's what Akana and what you guys are doing. When a driver, a vendor, or a claimant is waiting on a payment, what does that delay actually cost beyond the check itself?
Yeah, I mentioned it a second ago, which is credibility.
Yeah.
I think it can potentially raise the temperature, whereas, in my job as an empathetic, claims handling business, we want to lower or reduce the temperature. So imagine this scenario, we just bumped into you wherever in the world you happen to be. Your car is no longer drivable, but you've got, your 5-year-old daughter in the backseat who's crying because she's going to be late to dance practice or something. And so, that just adds a tremendous amount of stress onto you. You've already had a stressful experience being involved in an accident. Nobody's here to dispute that. But now you're left without a car. Well, how do we get you into a car as quickly as humanly possible? Okay, what if you need a hotel? What if you need, whatever it is that you happen to your life circumstance? I don't want to add stress to you. I don't want to make you go to the FedEx store to pick up a check, or, make you go out of your way when I've already inconvenienced you in some way. So meeting the claimant where they are with payment in hand is really the most effective and efficient way both to serve both interests, right? I'm trying to lessen the inconvenience on you, and I'm also trying to serve the needs of the customer by keeping the temperature or pulling the temperature down so that everybody kind of gets a win, so to speak. So we've had situations where we put somebody in a rental car, but they said, hey, I can't afford the $50 to put down as a deposit on this rental car. And we said, hey, no problem. Let me, use the ClaimSnap or SnapRefund platform to send you that $50. It's in your bank account immediately with real-time payment, and you can get that rental car and get on with your life. And so that's really the beautiful part of what you all offer, and how that works really hand in hand with the service that we try to provide.
You're going to bring a tear to my eye. It's just so peak.
Yeah. Well, I do what I can.
So it's a really interesting note you mentioned there about holding space for that empathy. How do you keep empathy and also a disciplined defense posture, which maybe could be at odds potentially on the same claim, in mind.
For sure. So, one thing to keep in mind is empathy does not mean agreeing with you. So there can be cases where it's completely not our fault, but we treat you and deal with you empathetically. So an example of that would be, sorry, Cody, you're going to be the tortfeasor here. Cody runs into the back of us. That doesn't prevent, so you're at fault, sorry. That doesn't prevent me from calling you and saying, Cody, are you doing okay? Is there anything that I can do to make this experience better for you? That doesn't mean I'm going to roll over. It doesn't mean I'm a doormat for Cody, but I'm meeting you on a human being level to see what your needs are, to be there for you, to help you in whatever limited way I can, with you being primarily at fault. And look, as we talked about earlier, there are some of those times where we're going to have a difficult conversation, but just because it's a difficult conversation doesn't mean it has to be adversarial. So for example, Cody, I completely understand where you're coming from, but here are the facts. You can deliver it in a way that's not scorched earth. And I think a lot of the times in the claims business, it is naturally adversarial, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the tone we take or the approach we take has to prompt those negative feelings, right? Tact is telling someone something they don't like to hear, but at the same time, they're like, man, that I don't like what he said, but I'm not upset about it, right? And so that's what empathetic claims adjusting looks like.
Yeah, really. I mean, when you have that amount of like posture, but on the same side as empathy, you really have a good balance when dealing with people, and I think that's really valuable. But you also wear a lot of hats. So wear the COO hat at Akana Claims, and then you're also assistant general counsel at a trucking company. Where do those two hats pull and help you as you build yourself and against each other?
Yeah, so my roles never conflict. What's good for a trucking company is good for Akana. It's a very unique opportunity to sit in both chairs. I know what the customer desires. I know what's important to the customer. And I also understand the regulatory issues on the claims manager side, while understanding what the customer needs and wants and what the customer's up against. So if you only wore the claims manager hat, you may say, come on, why can't you do this way, trucking company? And as the trucking company, I know, hey, there's a lot of logistics that go into what you're asking of me. And so the two are really just a perfect, symbiotic pair, and they really build off each other and give us both a lot of credibility in both spaces.
So with artificial intelligence and automation moving into all sectors of the economy, especially now into claims, what feels like quickly, which parts, if any, of transportation claims will still require human judgment?
Yeah, so in terms of the amount to resolve a claim for, or whether to resolve a claim, that's always going to be something that human eyes and hearts have to deal with. I think obviously dealing with the claimant, though there are some really compelling AI products out there that can interact with you, and at the end of it you go, man, did I just talk to a person or did I talk to a human being? I'm not sure. That level of empathy and responding and thinking on your feet is probably still going to remain a human being thing. But in terms of using AI for analyzing medical records, I know a lot of law firms already do that, and with a high level of success. But difficult judgment calls, negotiating settlements, things like that will probably remain a human element, at least for now. But yeah, it's really compelling. Things that used to take us a really long time to do, AI does a pretty good job with all of them. So it's interesting. When you and I sit down another 5 years to do another episode, the world's going to look a little different in claims.
Yeah, maybe the host of the podcast will be AI agents.
That's what I was
Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I'll be a little avatar.
Well, saying that, if you could change one industry-wide practice in how transportation claims are managed, what would it be, and what would you unlock, and what would that unlock?
Yeah, if I could change one industry practice, it's the evaluation criteria. I think right now in a lot of traditional settings, what defines a good claim resolution or what defines a good employee are measured by the wrong KPI. So right now you're probably measuring, I did this many tasks today, or I responded to this many diaries, or whatever it happens to be, Whereas the thing we need to be asking ourselves is, did you materially advance the customer's cause today, and how so? And you know what? If you did one thing today, but it got a positive outcome for the customer, that's a victory. That's a win, right? Whereas if you did 50 things rather mediocre in nature, that to me is not really that big of a victory if you're just pushing the paper and checking the box. Not my problem, hand it off to somebody else. So if I could change one thing, it would be the KPI with which we evaluate a successful adjuster, or we evaluate a successful claims practice.
Yeah, I think that's really compelling because it's hard to do in insurance in a lot of ways. I think some of the impacts of different roles within an insurer or TPA or MGA often are hard to measure by nature because you're dealing with, number one, premiums and like essentially what are the sales functions being somewhat far away from the claims payout portion, and both are equally important monoliths of the business. So as I look at that, I think it's interesting because I do agree, and I do think there's still some innovation yet to be had in the insurance sector around just finding the right data and ways to stitch together and measure impact, because it's not always so clear, I find. Now, as we look,
that's right.
what, well, maybe better said, I'm watching this. I think Akana is awesome. How can I find you? How can I learn more about Akana Claims Management?
Yeah, great question. So we are on the web at www.akanaclaims.com. Your viewership or anybody who's interested can always email me or call me. Like I said earlier, that's one of the great benefits of Akana is that we're accessible to the public. We're accessible to anybody who wants to talk to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We are starting to increase our LinkedIn presence as well. And then you may see us out and about at different industry events. I just got back from the American Trucking Association's legal forum earlier this week. That was fantastic. And so, if there's ever a conversation to be had or ever a presentation that anybody wants to hear us come in and talk, we're pretty entertaining. We take our business and our claims seriously, but we don't really take ourselves very seriously. We like to have fun, so we are always up for a conversation about anything. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here on your podcast, and hope it starts a conversation in somebody's head when they see it, which is like, hey, why are we accepting claims the way they are? Let's think outside the box. Never, ever accept the status quo is the best way to do things. Always evaluate and reevaluate.
Well said, Kyle. Well said. Thank you so much, Kyle, for being a guest on the SnapRefund Podcast. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys. We'll catch you guys next time. Have a good one.